Welcome back to our series on fasting. This is Pastor Aaron from the Crossroads Campus, and we are continuing this series on the spiritual discipline of fasting. And as promised, I'd like to begin by looking at Jesus' teaching in Matthew 6, the longest and most famous of Jesus' sermons, the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 6, what I'd like you to notice here is the importance of these three very practical instructions from Jesus himself, right? So you may remember these. First, you'll notice in chapter 6, verse 2, Jesus begins this section of his sermon by saying, quote, "When you give," not if you give, but when suggests that we are givers. Second, you will notice in chapter 6, verse 5, the phrase, quote, "when you pray." Again, suggesting that it is going to happen, followed by Jesus' instructions to his apostles on how to pray. We know it as the Lord's Prayer. Third, what follows seems fairly natural, but in chapter 6, verse 16, we read, quote, "when you fast." Again, suggesting that it is a when, not an if. Followers of Jesus give, pray, and fast. For some reason, though, most Christians may identify as givers and prayers. Many may not participate in fasting. Food has an incredible grip on our lives, physically and spiritually. In her book, Soul Feast, Marjorie Thompson is quoted as saying, "Fasting reveals our excessive attachments and the assumptions that lie behind them. Food is necessary for life, but we have made it more necessary than God. How often have we neglected to remember God's presence when we would never consider neglecting to eat?" It's hard to look the other way when we consider almost everywhere we go, what we see, hear, and think about is encouraging overconsumption. Whether it is shopping or TV or media or news, fast food, the grocery store, Walmart, Amazon, you just fill in the blanks. There's never enough. So let's just take a moment and look at that passage in Matthew chapter 6. I'm going to read verse 16 through 18. "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father, who is unseen, and your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Now, the ideas that come out of this become clear to me, and I see several things. The first, in addition to the idea that we will fast, two, it keeps it between you and God. By sharing with others that you are fasting, a natural sense of superiority and virtue signaling or performance or over-spiritualization tends to cloud the focus of the fast. This doesn't mean that fasts cannot be communal, but that the temptation for the incorrect motivation is very real. This has been my experience. I was sort of blown away at the power of the temptation to tell others about my fast, when in truth, this is something I've chosen to grow closer to God, not to share with others. The third thing that I see come out of this text is you keep your life as normal as possible. Wash your face, drink lots of water, go about your day. The physical effects of fasting will start to feel overwhelming. Tired, headache, hunger, thirst. But this passage encourages us to move on with our day as usual. The next is that you will be rewarded openly if it is kept secret. Fasting is a physical discipline, but a spiritual feast. According to the Spiritual Disciplines Handbook, fasting is the self-denial of normal necessities in order to intentionally attend to God in prayer. Bringing attachments and cravings to the surface opens a place for prayer. The physical awareness of emptiness is the reminder to turn to Jesus, who alone can satisfy. Although we often think of fasting as it relates to food, I believe the hunger response draws us to pray, reminds us of the purpose of the fast, and attracts us closer to God. We can fast from all sorts of things. Some of the common fasts include fasting from TV or social media or shopping, digital devices, email, computer games, and I'm sure you can get creative in your own space and interests. All of these regular attractions, when abstained from, remind us of our desire for more of God. And that is what we're after, more of God.